Like all Destiny expansions, the final shape is set to have a whole bunch of new exotics. Of course there will be armor, but also exotic weapons, and even some new legendary subfamilies of weapons which Bungie describe as having exotic-like properties. So there's a bunch of cool stuff coming out next year, and on top of brand new exotics that Bungie have revealed, or should I say teased, as we don't know a ton about them just yet, there will additionally be reprised exotics from Destiny 1, which will be returning to the game. And so in the video today we're going to take a look at the brand new stuff, but also a look back at some of the D1 exotics that'll be returning, and we'll discuss some of the improvements that Bungie have already shown for those weapons. But it's also a good opportunity to discuss potential updates to some of the functionality for those returning weapons. So we're going to round up what we know about final shape exotics and weapons in the video, and as always I hope you enjoy this one. Before we get into it though guys, the video today is sponsored by Ridge Wallets. And Ridge are famous for their low profile, highly durable wallets, which are incredibly sleek, secure, and easy to carry, storing up to 12 cards, as well as cash in a bunch of different styles. But now Ridge have expanded their range of awesome products to include the Ridge Ring. So Ridge Rings come in the same awesome styles as their wallets, offering neat colors and finishes like carbon fiber, tungsten carbide, titanium, and even 24 karat gold. But importantly, they maintain the minimalist Ridge design cues, featuring a beveled outer edge for a super comfortable no-pinch fit, which also looks super stylish and is right at home when paired up with their existing Ridge products. And like other Ridge hardware, the rings are super hard wearing and durable, whether you're cooking, working with your hands, or at the gym, and each ring comes with a dual band silicone version, which is great if you want the extra comfort or want to protect your other finishes. On top of that though, they come with loss and resizing protection, so if you lose a bunch of weight for instance or need a different size, each purchase comes with the option of 2 future exchanges for the same ring in a different size, which makes this a lifetime ring with easy replacement. And by heading to ridge.com/houndish, you can check out all of their products and deals. And if you use code houndish at checkout, you can save 10% on your order. Ridge have more than 3 million customers with 50,000 5-star reviews, and they're so confident that you'll enjoy the product that they have a 99-day test drive period. Even better, you can save some cash by using my link and unlock 10% off your purchase, whether it's for yourself or as a gift this coming holiday season by heading to ridge.com/houndish. And so I totally recommend that you check them out, linked below. They've got some really neat products in their store, and thanks to Ridge for sponsoring the video today. Now, getting into new weapons for the final shape, before we discuss reprised weapons, Bungie did tease a couple of brand new ones that we'll see for the expansion. So firstly, there will be a brand new Tex Mechanica sniper rifle. This of course will be an exotic weapon, and Chris Proctor from Bungie said, what if Golden Gun was a sniper? And so obviously a Golden Gun themed sniper is what we're looking at right here. Visually, it's very Hunter inspired with sort of Tex Mechanica icons, but also straps and knives built into it. So it shares that sort of common Hunter design language, I suppose. And obviously it will have the function to fire a Golden Gun style shot, but as we've seen with other exotic snipers, there'll probably be a special trigger for that round, or maybe it'll be reload activated or something like that. But of course there's always a bunch of potential with weapons like this. It's also worth mentioning snipers are getting a 15% buff in Season 23 ahead of the final shape, and that's separate to any additional changes that we might see with the final shape launch itself. Either way, it'll be cool to get another Tex Mechanica weapon, and I'm excited to see what it will do. They did additionally tease another weapon though, and this is a new exotic trace rifle, where the dev said, what if you could harness the might of the Traveler? Sort of indicating that that burst will be influenced by the Traveler's beam. And again, this is one they haven't shown gameplay for, but stylistically, the gun has a very clean look with a bunch of sort of rounded edges and circles. And from what we've seen in cutscenes and things like that, the Traveler's beam seems to affect things it hits with the light, so who knows, perhaps this trace could have a healing element, or even turn things into plants like we saw in some of the cutscenes. That's probably a bit of a stretch, but it certainly looks neat. It'll be cool to get another exotic trace rifle in the game. And in terms of new exotics, one more that we can probably count on seeing would be the Raid exotic. Presumably, this isn't either of the two we've just touched on, as Bungie don't normally share Raid exotics. But that's at least one more new exotic for the final shape. And this is where we get into returning exotics for D1, where the developers have said the plan is to make them unique in Destiny 2. So one that they revealed is the Kvostov, and of course this is the classic basic and damage daughter rifle, which is actually the first weapon players ever picked up in D1, and indeed this become part of the new light experience with the updated opening mission for Destiny 2. So essentially it's still the first weapon we ever use in the game, and back in Destiny 1 this was made exotic in Year 3 with the launch of Rise of Iron, where it had a bunch of different firing modes and rates of fire, and so we could pick between the classic broken scope and a modern fixed variant. Then it had the 3 firing mode options between fully automatic, burst fire, which makes it fire like a pulse rifle, and semi-auto fire, which is kind of like a scout rifle. And by today's standards, this would make a good crafting exotic, because in D1 it also had perk switches for the barrels with hammer-forged, rifle barrel, and braced frame. And then it could also switch between extended mag, counterbalance, and rangefinder, so it has a few options similar to some of the craftable exotics. And in addition to having different firing modes, it could also switch between a 450 RPM auto with bonus range and a 900 RPM with bonus stability. So in D1 it was a pretty unique weapon in that regard, but in D2, while the firing modes are unique, it feels like it may need a little bit more to make it interesting in terms of perks. Of course, it could remain pretty similar to Destiny 1 and Bungie could simply make it fairly OP, but the issue in D1 was that the firing modes were kind of gimmicky, and when it was burst fire it couldn't really compete against pulse rifles, and then in semi-auto it couldn't really compete with scout rifles, and as an auto rifle itself it was, I guess, just okay. Not that I'm trying to kill any hype for the weapon, but yeah, Bungie will probably want to look at the modes and add something altogether new, or make it perform much better than it originally did in the various modes. Although from their wording that is the plan, to keep the weapons unique in Destiny 2, so I'm excited to see how they do it for sure, and let us know what you'd love to see. It's also worth saying in Rise of Iron, Kvostov was an exotic quest, so it'd be cool if we get a quest for it again, and perhaps go explore in the chambers of the Cosmodrome wall to piece it together. There will either way be a healthy dose of nostalgia there. Then for Red Death, this is another confirmed returning weapon, of course a classic D1 pulse rifle, and folks have been asking for it to return for quite a time. When D2 launched, we did of course get a mini Red Death if you like, in the form of the Crimson hand cannon, which is pretty much the exact same weapon despite being a different archetype. And importantly, kills heal the wielder, and for Red Death, kills would also improve reload speed, and the reloads were somewhat similar to something like Outlaw. But then with Crimson in D2, it allowed precision kills to refill the magazine, so perks wise the two weapons are very similar, and obviously Crimson wasn't just influenced by Red Death, but really was the new version of it. But in D1, Red Death was a very good pulse rifle. Having the healing option in PvE saw it used regularly in Year 1, especially in some of the harder content, including in Crota's End where there wasn't a health regen. But Red Death was also a great PvP pulse rifle, and while it was outshone by other pulse rifles in PvP, especially after Year 1, because it took the exotic slot, and on top of the basic iron sight it had kind of awkward recoil. But it was able to 2-burst in PvP regularly if you hit shots, unlike myself. So Red Death was a pretty great weapon. I'd say the biggest challenge in bringing it back to D2 is firstly making it stand out versus Crimson. Obviously in that regard it does have much longer range capability than Crimson, but additionally as an exotic pulse, I'd imagine that Bungie will want to add some extra functionality, either adding new perks altogether, and I'm just spitballing, but an AoE health drain on groups of enemies would be pretty cool, or if they added a healing pulse, where kills grant a period of continuous healing or something like that. It could be a neat adaptation on the original perk, but I'm sure there's loads that Bungie could do with it, lots of potential, so hopefully Bungie will do that one justice as well. And then the final returning weapon is a very interesting one really, in the form of Dragon's Breath. And this rocket launcher never quite cut it in terms of performance in D1, partially because it was up against the likes of Galahorn, and of course even things like Truth. But while it was a unique weapon, it certainly struggled in terms of power and usability versus other weapons, so it's one of those rocket launchers that if it's coming back, I'd love to see it be shockingly good, like unexpectedly good. Kind of like a fighter who's bound to lose and then gets the knockout in round 2. It'd be really exciting if Dragon's Breath comes back and is an absolute monster. And in D2, looking at the gameplay, which there isn't a lot of, it would appear that Dragon's Breath now has a Scorch component. That wasn't a thing in D1, but it makes sense for D2. So in that respect, I'm hoping it's going to have some serious ignition capability. And there were actually 2 versions of it in D1. The Year 1 version would leave a solar-style grenade on targets that it hit and burn them over time. It was okay for bosses and doing some damage over time, but didn't really have any crowd control capability. And again, it was nowhere near as good as other exotic rocket launchers, so in Taken King I think it was, they updated it to have napalm, and they removed the solar flare altogether, replacing it with ground fire, so they sort of leaned into the larger AoE ad clear chaos element of the weapon, although it still didn't see a lot of use unfortunately, and kind of like the other reprised weapons, Dragon's Breath will no doubt need some additional capabilities. Again, we know that Scorch will be a component this time, and perhaps if the fire has a ground tracking element or a special ability that can allow it to do some filthy DPS, it could totally be a good rocket launcher. But we'll have to see what Bungie do with it, and if you guys have any ideas on how else it can be improved, let us know what you think down in the comment section. Otherwise though, Bungie did talk about new weapon subfamilies which border on exotic sort of functionality, and they showed off a rocket pistol sidearm that fires tiny slow moving rockets, which they described as hitting very hard and doing AoE damage, with a mixture of regular weapon and rocket launcher stats, which is interesting. Plus they'll be adding including a support frame auto rifle, which switches seamlessly from firing at enemies to healing allies. So they are doing a few interesting things with weapons for Final Shape. No doubt there's plenty more to be revealed, including a bunch of other exotics. But for today I wanted to go over the ones we know about and discuss the returning exotics in particular, looking back at them in D1 and talking about how they might change for D2. So share your thoughts down in the comment section. That's going to do it for the video today though. If you've enjoyed it, be sure to get subscribed and I've got more Destiny content on the way. I'll also keep you posted with all the news related to Season 23 and the Final Shape, so keep it locked and loaded right here. But otherwise, I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.